The desert night carried a silence that pressed against the ears, broken only by the lonely cry of a coyote in the distance. The small cabin, built of rough pine and clay, stood like a stubborn sentinel against the cold winds that swept through the canyon. Inside, a single fire cracked in the stone hearth, sending shadows stretching across the worn floorboards. John McAllister, a man who had wandered more trails than he cared to count, laid his saddle against the wall and rubbed his calloused hands together, grateful for warmth after days of dust and hunger. He had not expected company, yet company was exactly what fate had brought him. On the far side of the room, sitting stiffly on the edge of the single bed, was a young Apache woman. Her name, as she had whispered earlier, was Ahiona. Her dark hair fell in two braids that brushed her shoulders, and her eyes held the kind of fire that came from both hardship and hope. John had found her collapsed near the creek hours before, half-starved and trembling with fever. He could have left her, many men would have, out of fear, prejudice, or the simple instinct to look after only themselves. But something in her weak voice as she asked for water had struck deep in him. He remembered his mother's dying words, spoken long ago on a Tennessee farm: "Kindness costs you nothing, Johnny, but it saves lives you'll never know about." So he had carried Ahiona on his back, across the ridge, and laid her here in his one-room refuge. Now, as the firelight softened the sharpness of her cheeks, she looked at him with a strange mixture of gratitude and caution. You stay on floor?" she asked, her accent lilting, her English broken but clear enough. John gave a rough laugh. "There's only one bed, miss. But I reckon I've slept on worse floors than this." Her lips pressed together, as though holding back words. Finally, she said quietly, "One bed, two souls. I'm not afraid. I only wish to touch." The words hung in the air, startling him more than the crack of a gunshot would have. John wasn't a man unused to forwardness. He'd been in saloons where laughter and whiskey loosened lips, but this was different. Her voice carried no desire, no reckless temptation. Instead, it trembled with something else, something he couldn't place. Loneliness, perhaps. A hunger deeper than food. John crouched down near the fire, keeping his gaze fixed on the flames. "You've been through something hard," he said softly. "You don't need to explain it to me. Just rest. I'll see to it you're safe tonight." But Ahiona shook her head. "Not only safe. You do not know, my people gone. My sister gone. I hide secret here." She tapped her chest with her hand. "A mystery, you see later. But now, kindness feel like miracle." Her words pierced him, and for a moment, John found himself thinking of the war, of friends buried under oak trees in Tennessee soil, of nights when he had prayed for someone, anyone, to simply hold out a hand and remind him he was not alone. He turned his head to look at her, seeing not an Apache girl, not someone branded enemy by settlers, but simply a human being, clinging to what little trust the world had left her. "You're right about one thing," he murmured. "Kindness is a miracle in times like these. But I reckon it ain't my miracle alone. You're stronger than you know, Ahiona. You made it here. That counts for something, Dot." For the first time, her lips curved into a faint smile. It was fragile, but it reached her eyes. John noticed the tremor in her hands as she tried to pull the thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. Without thinking, he rose, crossed the room, and gently draped his own coat over her. She flinched at his closeness, then let out a breath and whispered, "Thank you." That night, John slept lightly on the floorboards, his hand resting near the revolver at his side, not from mistrust of her but from the world outside, the wild, the soldiers, the men who carried hatred like torches. Above him, on the bed, Ahiona shifted restlessly in dreams he could not see. Yet before dawn, a soft sound broke through his half-sleep. Her hand had fallen from the bed, brushing against his shoulder as though reaching for an anchor in her storm. He did not move, did not startle her, but in that fleeting touch he felt something stir in himself, a reminder of humanity, of the simple truth that even the most broken souls could find warmth in each other. When morning light spilled gold through the cracks of the cabin, John rose to find her watching him. She looked different in the sun, less like a fragile stranger and more like a survivor. Her mystery, whatever it was, still lingered between them. But the day ahead would demand choices neither of them had expected, and John already knew, this was no accident. Fate had brought two lost souls to share one bed, one roof, one fragile chance at trust. And fate was not done with them yet. The second day dawned clear, the desert sky a pale canvas of blue stretched endlessly above. The air smelled of mesquite and sage, sharp and grounding, but it was not the beauty of the land that pressed on John McAllister's mind. It was the weight of the girl's words from the night before, "I hide secret here." Ahiona sat on the edge of the bed, her slender hands working carefully at a strip of leather she had pulled from her small bundle. She was braiding it with the patience of someone who had learned long ago that silence could be safer than speech. When she finally looked up, John noticed the way her eyes darted to the window, scanning the open land as if expecting riders, soldiers, or shadows. "You've got something following you," John said finally. His voice was calm, but steady. "I can see it in your face. You don't owe me your truth, but if danger's comin', I best be ready." Her braid faltered. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. But then, in a low, halting tone, she spoke. "My people, taken. Soldiers say we must go to camp, far from here. My father say no. He fight. He die. My sister," she stopped, her breath catching, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to shed. "I run with little child. My sister's child. She give to me when soldiers take her. She say, hide him. He must live." John straightened slowly, the fire in his chest sparking into something sharper. "A child?" Ahiona nodded, her eyes filled with a fierce light. "Yes. He is here." She moved quickly, pulling aside the blanket that hung at the far end of the bed. Beneath, wrapped in another woven covering, was a small boy, no more than 4 winters old. His cheeks were flushed with sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling softly. John's jaw tightened. He had fought in wars where men slaughtered each other for land and flags, but seeing an innocent child tucked away in fear, it stirred something rawer than any battlefield. "Lord Almighty," he muttered. "You've been carrying him all this time?" "Yes." Her voice wavered. "Through river, through desert. No food. No water. I beg. I steal. I keep him alive. I, not know how long." She pressed a hand to her chest, trembling. "This is mystery I keep. Not just me. 2 souls, now 3. John exhaled heavily, dragging a hand down his weathered face. The burden she carried was staggering, and yet, she had not broken. Somehow, this young woman had walked through fire and still clung to hope. That kind of strength humbled him. "Listen," he said finally, lowering himself to her level. "You don't have to do this alone anymore. That boy's your blood, and I'll be damned before I let soldiers or anyone else lay hands on him. You've got my word." For the first time since they met, Ahiona's composure cracked. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks, her shoulders shaking as she pressed a hand to her mouth. John didn't reach for her, he knew better than to shatter the dignity she still fought to hold. But his words had landed. She believed him. The following days tested that promise. Twice, riders passed close to the cabin, blue coats glinting in the sun, their laughter carrying like poison through the canyons. John kept the fire low, kept Ahiona and the boy hidden. He felt his old instincts stirring, the same ones that had kept him alive during years of war: listen, watch, strike only if there is no other choice. Yet in the quiet hours, he discovered something he had not expected. It was in the way Ahiona hummed to the boy in her language, a soft melody that spoke of rivers and wind. It was in the way the child, though frightened, began to reach for John's rough hand, trusting him. It was in the way kindness, small and steady, wove itself into the silence until the cabin felt less like a hiding place and more like a fragile home. Still, danger drew near. One night, as a storm rolled across the desert, pounding rain against the roof, the door rattled with a sudden pounding. John rose in an instant, revolver in hand, heart hammering. A voice shouted over the storm, harsh, commanding. "McAllister. We know you're in there. Open up." Ahiona's eyes widened in terror. The boy whimpered, clinging to her skirt. John's jaw clenched. He recognized the voice. Captain Ellis, a man he had once ridden with, a man who now hunted natives like game. In that moment, John realized the truth. Fate had put him here not only to give shelter, but to make a choice. Would he hand over the girl and the child, preserving his own skin? Or would he stand against his own kind, risking death, to protect two souls who had trusted him? The pounding grew louder. John holstered his revolver, his mind racing. He whispered quickly to Ahiona, "Take the boy. There's a trapdoor under the rug. Crawl down, stay quiet. No matter what you hear, don't move." Her lips trembled. "John." He gave a tight nod. "Trust me. You said it yourself, 2 souls. Well, tonight, we're 3. And I aim to see all 3 make it through." As she lifted the rug and slipped into the darkness with the child, John turned to the door, shoulders squaring, heart steady. Whatever happened next would decide more than his own fate. It would prove whether kindness, fragile, stubborn, human kindness, was strong enough to defy the cruelty of men. And with that, he threw open the door to face the storm, and the soldiers who would test his promise.